getting into the real estate business? What were kind of those steps and career choices that you went through?
Yeah. So when I was at Ohio Dominican, so I studied business. So I was had a business administration degree, and so I was working at a J.P. Morgan Chase. So I went from a warehouse facility to J.P. Morgan Chase. So we were in private banking and what they call a department called investor accounting. So um, actually, we were dealing with foreclosures, and so I was like, wow, this is really amazing just to kind of see how that process worked. And our clients at the time at Chase were Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I was really intrigued by that. And I said, wow, it'd be pretty amazing. I wonder if I was able to get into real estate one day and tap into that network, you know, I was like, wow, that'd be pretty cool just to see what that looks like. Because on the banking side, it's totally different. We're just passing loans through and money through and interest through to those guys. But I didn't quite understand on the retail side, on the real estate side, how that worked. And so when I was at Chase, I bought my wife and I bought our first piece of property. It was a 4-family, and that was an amazing experience. We lived in one unit, rented out the other three, and I was like, yeah, I could see myself, tying in what I'm learning at Chase. And so, yeah, it was a pretty big decision to transfer from Chase to work in real estate full time because, man, I had a newborn and she was only 10 months old. I just graduated from college at the time and got my real estate license. So I graduated in '04, got my license in '04. So it was like, wow, this is a big year. But at the time, working at Chase, it was a conflict of interest to hold a real estate license and still work for the bank at the time. And so they pulled me in. It was kind of a crazy. I was working part time there and working part time as a realtor at Remax Town Center at Easton. And like I said, I had a 10-month-old and just trying to, figure it out and, trying to get my feet wet and, keep a base and then trying to keep some money through the home while I try to grow this thing. And, they pulled me in and said, hey, we understand that you're selling real estate. I was like, yeah. And I tried to, kind of play naive and dumb. They said, well, you can't do that. And I said, okay, what are you telling me? And they was like, you don't have to make a decision. You're a great employee here, but you have to make a decision, either give up your license or put them in escrow and you can stay here and I was really torn by that. And so I, told my wife, we prayed about it. I was like, I'm really feeling the leaning towards real estate. So we just by faith, just went out and stepped out there, and yeah, with a 10
That's
month
awesome.
old, yeah, married just a couple of years. So that was definitely a by faith moment.
That's awesome. So, did you have any interest in real estate prior to Chase, like just in general, or was it just there you started kind of seeing how real estate was working and moving and all of those things coming across the table, coming across the desk? Is
Yeah.
that really what piqued the interest, or did you have any interest prior to, and that was kind of the thing that kind of set you over?
Yeah, I was always intrigued on the investment side. My dad kind of, and that's really what kind of got me on into real estate was really more on the investment
Hmm.
side. My dad, gave me this, and I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he's kind of like a Warren Buffett type of real estate when I was in the service, and I kind of studied a little bit of his tapes and stuff like that. But it kind of was the seed initially, and then I didn't know. I knew I wanted to get into business, but I just didn't know what business to pursue. And so,
Sure.
in studying business administration at Ohio Dominican, I was like, okay, um, maybe I'm thinking about real estate more from an investor's perspective and applying what I've learned in college on that end. And then it was like, okay, well, let's maybe look at the licensing piece. And I think what Chase actually did was to open up my eyes on the Fannie and Freddie Mac side as far as how interest and things like that is being passed. And so I really kind of gravitated and said, let's get a real estate license and really see how that game plays.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
So the business side, like going to school for that, did you grow up with like that entrepreneurial spirit, or was it just like, hey, this is probably a degree that will probably serve me at any stage of life?
Mhm.
Um, did you have kind of that background growing up?
Yeah, man. My dad, man, was an entrepreneur. My grandfather, would do door to door selling shoes. I found that out at a later time. And my dad, I watched him start a few businesses. And so he would always tell me, man, it was a phrase. He said, man, there's plenty of money on the ground. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so he was always trying to get me hustling. Like, I had a paper route. And it's funny, like, I did very poorly in school, but I always had a knack for kind of selling. So I would, it'd be little stuff. My parents
Yeah.
would go to like, Walmart and buy a bulk, of candy and pastries. And I just grab some of them and just sell them, at school, little things like that. Just, it was real small, but he'd be like, all right, you got your paper route business, which, my paper route, if anybody has ever had a paper route, it is a business. I mean, you're collecting, you're knocking on doors, you're collecting money, you're delivering the service through papers. And I mean, it's a hustle because you're getting up really, really early. Your customers and your clients expect their papers to be delivered at a certain time. They want them at the doorstep. And then you got this bill at the end of the month, at the time called the Columbus Dispatch that said, hey, we need our money, and what I collected, I had to make sure that I had enough to pay those guys, and then the extra I would keep. So it was really kind of, introducing me to basic bookkeeping and, keeping my receivables right. So that those that was a phenomenal job, which I think ultimately I won't say it was a job, it was a business, and it was a phenomenal business to kind of get my mind right on, keeping my money right, making sure my bills were paid, and then not overspending because at times my parents would bail me out because I overspent. And they'd say, "Man, would you just please save?" Because there was a saying. My Columbus dispatch manager, he said something. He said, "Hey, man, you can keep a lot of your cash and just cash the checks and then pay your dispatch bill with the checks." So I'd have all this cash on me, first of the month, and I'd take the cash. And there was a big mall in Columbus called Northland Mall at the time, right on Morse Road. Now it's like a state building. And man, I just go out there and buy shoes and clothes just like any other teenager, just broke after that. Dad would be just on me like, hey, look, you need to save some of your money. Like, this bill's coming. We can't keep bailing you out. And so he said, you're running a business. You're a business owner. And I'm like, I'm a business owner at 14 years old. Like, thought I was just doing what I do. But he was really, getting me to think that way on how to make sure you're paying your bills on time, your payables, and then keeping reserves back. So I think all of that, man, just ultimately kind of stayed with me, and it
Yeah.
just got magnified, but he would teach me, hey, if I didn't pay my bill back to even him, he would actually repossess my clothes and shoes. So my dad, man, I mean, he was tough love, but he's like, hey, you owe me money. I've given you a couple of months to pay me back. I'm taking your brand new Jordans. And I'm like, geez, daddy, and we wore the same size, which was crazy. I'm like, dag, man, cut me some slack. I'll get you back. But he was like, son, if you ain't paying your bills in real life, this is what happens. People repossess your stuff. And so even that subliminally, because, I'm a REO foreclosure agent by trade, subliminally,
Yeah.
man, that just stayed with me, so yeah, man, it's crazy those little life lessons, which I thought it was just like, hey, I'm just got a normal paper route, but it was a business.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm sure your dad wearing your shoes or something like that probably was like a a subtle reminder, right?
Yeah, it's like, man, because he wear it and model it in front of me too. Starter jackets were big then. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm dating my age. I'm 45, so we were into cross color jeans, Carl Kanais, and Jordans, obviously, starter jackets, and man, I just blow my money on just we call it gear. Just I mean, I'd always try to make sure I was geared up. And he was like, "Hey, you're blowing your money. You're not saving anything." And he just was constantly on me. He said, "Son, you're gonna have to learn the discipline on how to save." And we really didn't get too much on the investment side, but he did break out a Wall Street Journal a couple times, and I didn't know what I was reading. But he was like, "Hey, look, man, look at some of these stocks that you're buying Nike. Wouldn't it make sense to one day maybe own some shares of Nike?" So he would talk to me like that, at
Yeah.
14, and it was just like, wow, this is Dad. I just want the Jordans, man, because I want everybody to see that I got the new pair. But he's like, "Hey, you could wear those, but how about some ownership?" And I was like, wow, so now I can appreciate what he
Yeah.
was saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was crazy, those life lessons, man. I try to obviously teach those to my kids.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's, I'm sure, that has greatly impacted, the business on the real estate side and where how you handle things there too. Cause, I
Yeah.
got in real estate at 22 right out of college. So,
Okay.
I'm sure we've done deals. You mentioned the REO and foreclosure. That's what I cut my teeth on, working with investors and,
No, yeah. Oh,
um,
yeah. Yeah.
Ryan really, when I joined up with him had, I think 120 REOs that we were selling off for a small bank.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Okay.
um,
Yep.
those
Yep.
those were the days. But so you got in,
Mm-hmm.
licensed. You said in '04.
Oh, four. Yeah.
Figuring out, navigating the waters until Chase kind of caught on of what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when did you have to make that decision to really, jump into real estate full time and make that your career? What year was that?
Well, it was '04. So, I
Okay.
mean, it happened really fast. I think I got my license and my degree really in the same months. Excuse me, in April, and I walked in June. Graduated actually in June when I walked. But yeah, it was really fast. And then Chase, they were on me, like, so it was. I think I was full time like July of
Okay.
'04. So yeah, they were like, hey, you got to make a decision.
And so